Hello and welcome to Shed TV. My name is Keith and this is part 1 of my Series 3 Land Rover rebuild. Back in 2007 I decided, after many years of wanting to own a Land Rover, that I would buy one. I went on eBay, not knowing a great deal about Land Rovers, and bought a 1970 Series 2A short wheelbase diesel. It was up in Manchester, and I didn't go and look at it, I just bid on it. I think I paid about 600 or 700 quid for it, which is kind of the going rate for series Land Rovers back in the day, and got on the train and went to pick it up. When I got there, the battery on the Land Rover was flat, and the chap I bought it from very kindly took me around to Halfords, where I bought a battery, and he lent me some tools to change the battery over. I put it on and set off south in it, and I hadn't quite appreciated how slow an old diesel Land Rover is until I tried to drive it down the M6, and I went 2 junctions before I was absolutely petrified of being overtaken by lorries, because I could only do 40 miles an hour, and made the rest of the journey on A roads. By the time I came through Birmingham, it was the early hours of the morning, and by the time I got down here to Evesham, I don't know what time it was, but it was starting to get light again, and I felt like I'd driven a Paris-Dakar rally. I've got to say it was an experience, but it's not one that I would be likely to repeat. Anyway, I drove around in this Land Rover for a year or so, thoroughly enjoying it. But to be honest, my ideas of a rolling restoration were a bit beyond my capabilities, I think, at the time. It had fairly extensive chassis rot, and to be honest, it was in quite a bad way. When the MOT time came round, I didn't put it in for the MOT because it was quite clear it would never go through, and I bought another one. I bought a 109-inch, about 1981, I think, something like that. I think it was an X-Reg. You'll be able to see it on this photograph that I shall cunningly insert in a second, and that ran very nicely for a very short time until it had a catastrophic engine failure, which was a real shame, because it was quite a good vehicle. Although thinking back, it did have very vague steering, kind of wandered about all over the place, and the turning circle of quite a large ship. So this brings us to about 2008, end of 2008 I suppose. By this time I've now got 2 Land Rovers, neither of which work. One's got rotten chassis and one's got a broken engine. So I weighed up the options. Realistically, the 88-inch wanted a replacement chassis, and the 109 definitely needed a replacement engine. But you know, this was 10 years ago or so, and series Land Rovers are 10 a penny, and virtually worthless. So I thought the best thing to do was to sell the 2 Land Rovers and see if I could buy a better one. That's exactly what I did. I got 450 quid for each Land Rover, and for the princely sum of 770 quid, in March of 2009, I bought this brown Land Rover, 1983 88-inch diesel county station wagon. It's a real, genuine county station wagon, complete with all the I was going to say fancy trim, but I might be overstating it slightly. Less Spartan trim, although a lot of it, to be honest, was in quite a bad way. Inside, the front seats were some odd ones from a different Land Rover, and the dashboard was pretty knackered looking. Steering wheel is some weird thing, I don't know what you call those small racing steering wheels, but completely unsuited to the heavy steering. The only original bit, as far as I could see, was the headlining and the associated trim. Unfortunately, the headlining I managed to damage when I took the roof off, so that's that gone. Well, I've still got it, but it's torn. And the rear seats, which were the original fold-down rear seats, and a bloke offered me 100 quid for those, and I bit his hand off, not realising at the time that perhaps maybe I should have hung on to those, but you know, I didn't really think of it in terms of its originality back then. Mechanically, the Land Rover is actually really good. It got a reconditioned gearbox with less than 10,000 miles on it, and the engine had recovered about 70,000 from new, and I've got all of the old MOT certificates and receipts and such like to prove the mileage is genuine. The brakes look to have been upgraded with copper brake lines and new shoes. Not long before I bought it, as I was all in really good order. Although I did have to get a new servo within the first year when that failed. But other than that, they work very well. It's got a stainless steel exhaust on it, which is still intact, even though that's probably about 20 years old. And generally, as I say, mechanically, in pretty good fettle. The bodywork is where the Land Rover lets itself down, really. At some point, it's had an external roll cage fitted to it, exo cage, I think they're called. And that, having been removed at some point prior to my ownership, had left some holes in the sides of the wings and the back panels. Not to mention the inside of the tub floor, which was really butchered. Other than that, it was generally quite sort of knocks around. One of the doors was bent, the wings are pretty bent. The hard top, thankfully, with its safari roof, was actually really straight. So that's where I was in 2009-ish, and I drove around for a year or two. After a while, I took the roof off, ran around with no roof on for a little while, and then I had a short cab roof on it for a bit, one winter. And that takes us to 2011, the winter of 2011, I think, which is when I had the Land Rover MOT. It passed the MOT, and I brought it here to the shed. My thinking was that if I brought it here with the full MOT, I could do little jobs on it and still drive about, try and keep it from becoming a project that just sat here and never got finished. Best laid plans. So I did various jobs to it, none of which I've entirely completed, including some work to the rear body, which is currently off the vehicle, and various other things. And I did this on and off over the last few years, but for one reason and another, various other things in my life got in the way, and unlike many projects, it kind of stalled a bit. I did revisit it about 3 years ago, and unfortunately, when I fired it up, I hadn't appreciated that the earth bond had come loose from the battery, and it earthed back through the pull stop cable for the diesel pump, which got very hot and set fire to the wiring behind the dashboard and the wiring in the engine bay, and the whole thing was on fire. It was utter misery. Fortunately, it was out in the yard at the time, and I'd got a couple of fire extinguishers. I'm really thankful for that, because I ran in here, got the extinguishers, and managed to put it out before it did too much damage to it. At that point, I was really disheartened, and I pushed it back into the shed, and there it sat for a year or more, and until eventually I thought, well, I'll go back to it and have another look, and that was probably a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago. I don't know. What I then discovered, as if it couldn't get any worse, was that the dry powder fire extinguisher stuff is highly corrosive, and it dissolved quite a lot of the Land Rover, so it's now in an even worse state than it was before. So that's another challenge to deal with that. So not only has it got burned out wiring, burned out dashboard, corroded everything, it's all in bits all over the place. I don't know where half the bits are. So that takes us to the present day. What am I going to do now? Well, I'm going to put it back together. I've decided I'm going to make a concerted effort to find all the bits and pieces, and if I can't find them, I'll have to buy bits, repair all the things that are wrong, stick it all back together, and it's going to be on the road by the summer. Well, I'm going to try anyway.